you explore all of these different dimensions of connecting into who you are as a sexual being. And each of those is a great gateway into understanding yourself in a new way, and then stepping forward into sexual connection with others, like with that new knowledge.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it's not about, like, there is in the book we really are looking at, as you're saying, these scripts and these highly gendered scripts, and it's not about blaming or finger pointing or, God forbid, like male bashing or any of that. It's not that at all, right? The ways in which we're given these gendered messages cut all of us off from living wholeheartedly and fully. I just couldn't tackle all of it in one book, but I mean, you could speak to this, like as a boy and a man. Boys and men are given horrific messages around their own sexuality, right? There's sort of this, it's what drives me crazy about these dress code laws that schools, or rules that schools will do, right? This idea that girls' shorts have to be this length and girls' tank top straps have to be this width. And one of the things it does is it reinforces this idea, this message to boys, that your sexuality is so dangerous and so out of control that the world has to be protected from you, from the power of your sexual energy, versus teaching boys that sure, erotic energy courses through you, but here's how you ground it, and here's how you harness it, and here's how you boundary it, and here's how you treat it with respect. And if those were the tools that we gave to boys, I think that's just, I don't know. I haven't grown up in this lifetime in the masculine, so I didn't have those messages, but I don't know what that does, and that was the early messages that you were given, was this fear of being perceived as creepy or dangerous. Like, I just think it's all problematic, and it keeps people coming, whether it's male bodies or female bodies or one of each coming together. It keeps those bodies from coming together in a way where each person can feel integrated and ready to step into that space of intimacy and closeness.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think your book is a valuable resource for whoever on the wherever you are on the spectrum. I mean, I did find myself reading it and nodding for each chapter and being like, yeah, like, guys need this just as much. And that's been definitely a journey for me as an adult, has been reclaiming my own desires, and where those things emerge at different places on the spectrum as well. In what you were just describing, I was just thinking about how men in many cases need to learn how to be in touch with their bodies and with receptivity in sex, and really being attuned, and because they're so conditioned to be pursuers and achievers throughout life, but definitely in the sexual realm as well. And for women, I think part of that reclaiming is also being willing to engage in seizing your desire and owning it, and being willing to do that just like any guy would. We're wrestling, of course, with what's culturally acceptable, back to the very first thing we were talking about. But how beautiful it can be when two people come together and each person owns who they are, what they want, what their fears are, what their desires are, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and when they can do it in a way that doesn't judge the other. I mean, right. We all need that when we're in the bedroom. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And it makes sense that we have gotten stuck because the information has gotten stuck. Like, one of the things that was so interesting in the research for the book was to look at, this book couldn't have been written 20 years ago because we've had a burgeoning of science around female sexuality, right? So we, for years, remained willfully ignorant about female sexual anatomy, even, right? So medical anatomy textbooks would blur out the clitoris, and it wasn't fully mapped, fully imaged until really, really recently, like 20 years ago recently. So it was, the clitoris was thought of as this like little button, when in fact it's this larger structure that extends deep into the body, and is the potential for pleasure is incredible. In fact, that's the only job that the clitoris has is pleasure. And so what might be different if a woman came into her sexuality, knowing that and honoring it, and what if then sexual scripts were built to really honor that part of a woman's body in a way that the traditional heterosexual script, which, you know, we as a culture have really held up one particular sex act, right? We've held up penetrative sex as the most sex. There's sort of this hierarchy of sex acts. We learn it on the playground in elementary school, first base and second base and third base and home run. So this whole kind of script around like how far you're trying to get and how far you're going, with this goal being penetrative sex, which the research shows tends to not be the most orgasm producing part of the realm of sexual behaviors, because it's not the most, it doesn't maximize clitoral stimulation. Potentially for some women it does, for others it doesn't. But just this idea that if we only have one storyline, what are we limiting for any of the bodies in the bedroom? As you're saying, like men exploring receptivity and not having to be in charge and not having to perform and having their own like being not so limited by the ideas of what they ought to be doing in the bedroom. And so just the opportunity to deconstruct all of that and challenge it and push back a little bit is really important and really healing. And that's what we found. I had this amazing team of graduate students and undergraduate students with me as we were researching and writing, and we moved through a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, you know, at sort of the limits that have been put on people's experiences. And then, you know, to connect the loop back to what you said in the beginning, that it affects our relationships. If we can't cultivate erotic connection in our intimate relationships, they're going to suffer, right? Having a really fun sex life kind of buffers a couple against the storms and the annoyances and the irritations of, you know, partnership.